Zoos can sometimes be a place about beauty of nature and animals living in their supposed habitats, right? But what if zoos gave you a feeling of dread? Like something is not right. Hi, welcome back. My name is Raf Polo Laurent, rocking the Akatsuki merch. Shout out to my Naruto fans. And after months since the last horror video, I was feeling this itch to sort of make another video related to the horror genre. Since the last time I made a horror video, I came across this little niche project I found on TikTok known as the Zoo of Tomorrow. Now, this project is made by a content creator known as AlmostHumanTV, who sort of is carving his own little universe on TikTok. To my knowledge, he has other content and projects on his page known as the Human Connection Tapes, which gives you this uncanny feeling. Sometimes it's subtle and sometimes it's very in your face. But the project that really took off for him was the horror project known as the Zoo of Tomorrow. It's an ARG project which, similar to his previous work, gives you an eerily uncanny feeling in your stomach. You are just seeing what looks like humans in a suit behind a cage. In other parts, it looks like a literal demon or some non-human creature underneath the suits. There's so many questions I have. I need to know all the lore on what exactly is going on here. And in today's video, we're going to be discussing the 14 different TikToks to this story, reading descriptions, other people's comments and theories, and try to dissect what the overall message, the story that we can sort of create from these little bits of information we have so far. And in doing so, sort of spotlight a talented project overall, because I looked and scoured the internet for any interpretation whatsoever, and it seems like no one else is covering this project yet. So sit back, relax, get out your energy drinks, and let's get into it.
Is that the person with eyes in there? You just walked right by.
Alright, so part one, pretty simplistic video. It looks like a family is out on a zoo trip, you know, minus the fact that clearly these costumes, I mean, just look at the damn monkey. Pretty obvious that it looks like a human underneath these suits. But in this universe, it does seem to be acknowledged by the guy holding the camera or someone he is with saying the following.
Is that the person with eyes in there?
A person with eyes underneath. So I mean, if this wasn't something out of the norm in this universe, why would they be pointing the fact that it looks like a human is underneath these costumes or these suits? The creator, AlmostHumanTV, who going forward I'm going to shorten for AHTV for time's sake moving forward, AHTV does point out in a reply to a question, genuinely, is this commentary on captivity? And he says several meanings behind it, but that is one of the primary motivations. So let's keep that in mind going forward when we see the other parts. Perhaps that's going to have a very big overall theme going forward. Also, someone pointed out a brown creature behind the panda that shows up just for like one frame in the beginning, then disappears. I don't think that that's too much of significance, but what I think is of some significance is before this TikTok ends, we get this static image of two people, one guy that's yellow and then another guy next to him. So I sort of wonder what the implication is there from AHTV, why he would put that there, if there's any sort of significance for it. Before we move on to the next part, I would just like to point out, if you have seen any of my other horror content or horror videos, you know I am against AI slop. But it seems based on the comments that I'm reading, there's some significant conversations in certain parts if this is AI or CGI. This is from an artist who says, I'm sick of people saying it's AI comments, even old videos are consistent. Stop saying everything is AI. I just want to enjoy an analog horror without everyone saying it's AI. Please tell me this isn't AI. I don't want ARGs and indie horror turning AI, please no. Now there's one comment that says the person in the back looks AI. The numbers are better than normal, but it's going up to 20 and then it goes down to 0 and back up. The comment below that says it's CGI. Another comment here says it's CGI. You can tell by the background and movement. AI tends to struggle a bit with little details, and the background doesn't noticeably change during the camera movement like most AI videos tend to do under close inspection. So overall, I'm hearing that some people are saying it's AI on first inspection, but people who are kind of artists and aware of CGI are saying the backgrounds are consistent throughout all the parts and videos. And to my knowledge of all 14 parts, only one of them contained an AI tag on TikTok. I'm not sure of the nuance of that, but the creator's also leaving it a little bit ambiguous. I feel like I would come out and be like, no, it's not all AI if I really did work on it and it's CGI. But I'm going to give the benefit of doubt here. I also did reach out to AHTV about this, so maybe he's seeing this video and can clarify that for the rest of us. And again, I'm going to give some charity because I feel like with horror ARGs as a genre, you can assume a lot of projects are AI. So I'm going to assume it's CGI unless the creator says something different. So without further ado, that little sidetrack aside, let's get on to the next part and back on track.
Please waking up. Please waking up.
So part 2, I think, does a good job of adding more lore, more questions.
New lore to chew on.
Just overall adding more lore to this world, more character to this universe AHTV is trying to build. 2 things I want to point out in this part, unlike part 2, but it seems like things like the snake and the turtle exhibit, those seem to be like actual snakes and turtles, not like humans in a costume that we've seen in part 1. So I asked myself why this specific exhibit has real animals to my interpretation. Like, why break the consistency in this exhibit specifically? But then we have an outside voice from a woman saying he's waking up.
Please waking up. Please waking up.
And she says this to the bear and zebra specifically. What's the subcontext there? Is it meant to be like the performers are waking up from a trance or a slumber? I'm not sure, but side point, I do find it funny in the comments that people are questioning if this is real to some extent. Like, are these like real people in a costume? That's how you know your world building is really strong. I mean, imagine if you actually had people in suits behind a cage. I feel like this is what it would sort of look like. Last thing before we move on to the next part, the noise that the lion makes, if we're to believe it's performers and actors underneath the suit, that's a pretty realistic like roar or animal noise. How exactly is that happening? Are they really humans underneath? We'll probably get more clarity in the future parts, but these are just questions I have right now on part 2.
Not even trying anymore.
Part 3 really leans into the captivity themes that we've been speaking about more than any of the other lore, in my opinion, in this part. It's very eerie seeing the performers standing still, almost like in a trance. I mean, look at the elephants. Just look how depressed, and you can draw that parallel to real life scenarios even, seeing certain animal exhibits where the animals are clearly exhibiting depression from captivity. But don't just take my word for it. Let's see what AHTV says in a reply here. This is actually an accurate representation of how sad and bleak I feel at certain zoos or things like the circus. And then he says, I cannot agree more. Looking at animals is one of my favorite things to do in life, but zoos make me feel absolutely terrible. I always regret going as soon as I think about how terrible it is for the vast majority of them. Giraffes are the only ones that seem like they're chill with the fact that they're in a zoo, lol. In the same chain, AHTV then clarifies by saying, I don't necessarily think that zoos are evil or bad, but there is no way you can look into the eyes of a primate in there and not think, man, they clearly don't belong here. Can you imagine being placed into a cage for the entire world to gawk at you? They clearly look distressed. They do not belong in cage in zoos. A lot of them experience obvious signs of psychological distress. I know zoos rehab animals and do a million other great things for conservation. They're not inherently evil, but I can't pretend that all the animals are stoked to be there. And in this part, it seems like AHTV really gets this point across in this part by having the aquatic animals do a slight wave and then a kid getting really excited saying, oh my god, the dolphin waved at me. The dichotomy, the juxtaposition is really apparent here of the captive performers behind a cage to the people recording. They're having a grand old time. But again, that juxtaposition is very obvious here. Remember, AHTV says, can you imagine being placed into a cage for the entire world to gawk at you? He really gets that point across in the aquatic and elephant exhibit, in my opinion. Some other notable things to point out in this part was a comment chain from this user over here, who says, reminds me of the human zoos at the World Fair. And then AHTV goes accurate. So remember before how AHTV made a hypothetical, like, could you imagine if humans were being observed like a zoo? Well, what if I were to tell you that actually happened? Not to this degree where they're hiding under costumes, but humans were actually put on display and to be viewed like a zoo. And that's what this commenter here is referring to. And that's what this commenter here is referring to. One of the World Fairs. Now, the World Fairs were events held around the world to showcase inventions, overall human advancements, and human inventions. Now, for a period of time, I'm going to use the 1904 World example, held in St. Louis, where more than 1,000 Filipinos were exhibited as part of the US colonial display following the Spanish-American War. So this is a real-life world event that we can point to where humans were viewed like zoo animals. God, we are just so barbaric. Like, sometimes when I read history, like, I just cannot believe the things that were passable back in the day. But to simplify, captives were used to justify American rule over the Philippines, or in other words, to justify colonialism. So the goal was to dehumanize this population, these people, to justify the war, show our strength, to be viewed like zoo animals. We now recognize the cruelty could be, said for animals who yearn to live in the wild, but are instead caged like cattle. If we cannot expect animals to endure this treatment, how can we expect humans in our reality to endure that? Or in this case, this story's case, in this universe, these performers to endure this treatment. And we will see the effects of that in later parts. Last quick thing I would like to point out is even the person recording points out the elephant exhibit, for instance, that they're not even trying anymore. Was there a point in time where this has always been a normal thing for performers to be really into the act of acting like animals and all was fine and dandy? But if so, why? Where are the regular animals like the snake and turtle we saw in part 2? We know in real life, the real life world human exhibit was used to justify a war going on between America and the Philippines. But why is it justified in this universe? These are questions I have. So on to the next part.
They look kind of tired.
Yeah, it's weird.
Guess it's supposed to be birds of the future or something. Okay, let's move on.
So in part 4, we get even more lore building. We have a nocturnal exhibit with a raccoon and bat, but the birds really take the cake here. The person recording points out how the actors in the bird exhibit look kind of tired, and a woman voice behind him, probably the mom in this family, you can see their son just out of frame, but she points out, yeah, that's really weird. This is then followed up by the man recording saying, guess this is the birds of the future or something.
Yeah, it's weird.
Guess it's supposed to be birds of the future or something. Okay, let's move on.
I'm not sure if that significance here, is he referring, kind of doing a play on with the name of the zoo, Zoo of Tomorrow? Like when he's referring to them being the supposed birds of tomorrow. I'm not sure, but one more significant thing I want to point out in this part is the description for this part. And it says the following. They said everything inside the Zoo of Tomorrow was fully automated, but those aren't machines. And I'm confused because it seems pretty obvious that these aren't automated machines. Even people in part 1 were pointing out eyes underneath or a human underneath. So why even lie when the zoo says that they're fully automated? Do they mean like they are trained to stay in character, like machines, despite being humans? That's interesting to note, the use of the word automated here, like a sleeper cell agent, you say a certain trigger word and the agent goes into action. But the use of the word automated, like were the performers always expected to be in character of these animals 24/7 or whenever they were being viewed during open hours of this zoo? Let's see if we can get some more information in the future parts. part 5, we flip back between the bat and raccoon exhibit and the ape exhibiting more uncanny feeling. We then see at the end of the clip an Arctic exhibit where a kid excitedly exclaims, "It's him!" Like a child would be at a regular zoo exhibit. The description is worth of note here, where AHTV says, staff described strange behavior inside the Arctic and Prime exhibits before the zoo shut down in 2002. So it seems that the zoo in this universe shut down because of either unpopularity or, even worse, something traumatic may have happened to cause a shutdown. That is the implication I get here. Maybe we'll get down to that event in a later part. In this part, we have an insect exhibit and another aquatic exhibit. The description for this part is pretty eerie, and it says the following. During the final few years before they shut down Zoo of Tomorrow, it shifted through several iterations with their exhibits. The deeper we get into these videos, the less visitors can be heard in the background. Was anyone even going towards the end? Who was recording? When will I get my uppies? Okay, that last part, I made it the fuck up. But you gotta spice up the middle parts of this story, you know? Middle child syndrome. It's a 14-part story. Why I read the description like a failed Studio A24 narrator? Cause free will, baby. But in all seriousness, I cannot get over the fact how silent and devoid of commentary we are at now in this story. No character in these videos to add on to the plot. The silence is deafening in this part of the story. It is loud, the silence, and I think it does a great job to show perhaps the attempted adaptations the zoo is trying to make. But overall, it does not seem to be working. Perfect use of liminal space horror here, despite the beginning of the end for this zoo. The actors are still acting, hanging aimlessly in the air of the aquatic exhibit, moving ever so slowly than ever before. Looking more lifeless, especially in the insect exhibit. Nothing notable from the creator mentioned in the comments. Overall, this part serves as a turning point in the story to me, and uses liminal horror and silence to set this up. Part 7 of this is definitely the most ambiguous. Null of context, and I freaking love it. So much to theorize. But one immediate observation I have is just how anxious and freaked out the actors under the suits are getting. Look at the alligator slumped over. Alligator, right? Not a crocodile? Someone's typing in the comments right now it's a crocodile, I don't know. But the point is, the actor in this suit looks like he just had the worst hangover of his life from the night before. Going off chronologically from part 6 to 7. Remember, I said part 6 was the turning point of this zoo. What started out as a dystopian family day out to go see some actors in animal suits because that's what normal families do in this universe. We are now at a point where the zoo is devoid of consumers and viewers to this attraction. It seems we are delving further and further into madness, with the bear exhibit seeing the actor twiddling his fingers and pacing anxiously almost. The alligator or crocodile exhibit looking even more unkempt than the other exhibits in different parts. The description sort of backs up my theory by stating the following. The footage suggests the Zoo of Tomorrow was still operating, but its purposes and its caretakers are no longer clear. So the zoo is operating still, there's no customers. The purpose of what the zoo is intended to do now with no eyeballs is unclear. What are the objectives? What reason do these actors have and the caretakers if people aren't coming by? Do you still function as normal, as an animal, as if people are visiting and watching you if there's no one by to observe that? Why? What for? Alright, so in part 8, I now notice Since the switch up in part 6, the turning point of this story, we've been getting less and less breadcrumbs in the comments by the creator. And we see this same pattern of less and less breadcrumbs in part 8. I see you, AHTV. No more training wheels. Okay, man, it's all on us. All right, let me lock in. Okay, so first off, I want to emphasize the description again, as it's been giving us the most context to these videos, devoid of visitors and commentary. But the description points out the following. The enclosures fell apart first. Their minds followed. There were clearly no visitors at this point. Why were they still recording? The zoo's decay mirrored their minds. Cages rusting. Thoughts unraveling. I want to emphasize this part right here. The zoo's decay mirrored their minds. Mwah. Chef's kiss. I love this imagery right here. I mean, look at how devoid of life and even trying to act like the animals they're supposed to represent. Look at the lack of effort to do so in these clips. The apes exhaustingly sitting, the horses just laying down. The pigs doing whatever this is. Also, why is one of the actors' masks on the floor right there? Also, the horses laying down. The brown horse looks like there's an actor underneath, but the lighter shade horse besides him, it looks devoid of anyone underneath. But we also see in this part the infighting amongst the actors with the horses. I think this comment right here by this user explains exactly what I'm feeling from this part. Subtle isn't the right word, but it feels accurate, lol. They are straddling that line, completely unnerving, and just enough is left unsaid to maintain the tension. You don't break it or make things corny, for lack of a better word. Very cool and delightful. Perfectly said by this commenter. Just enough is left unsaid. We just have these clips to go off of and the description, and my imagination is running for different questions and answers and theories. We know one thing is for certain. The actors are getting more and more anxious and unpredictable as the parts go further on and on. You hear a gunshot of some sorts at the end of this part. Does this imply someone got shot? Perhaps an actor not keeping up with the act of some sorts? Going AWOL? But let's see this descent into madness continue on. There's no order left to break. The visitors vanished months before this, the staff not long after. Yet, the show goes on. Some were human, some were said to be animatronic, but whatever they once were is lost now. Identity swallowed by the roles they never stopped performing. Oh yeah, now we're getting into insane levels of captivity here. You know, this reminds me of an experiment Vsauce did.
Hey, Vsauce, Michael here.
Like, yeah, that Vsauce. I don't know if I'm dating myself here. Leave a comment down below if you know who I'm talking about. He did an experiment, this YouTuber, to show the cruelty of being isolated for long periods of time and its efficacy on having prisoners in these isolated conditions. There is an efficacy question if we should even put this on prisoners. So imagine actors. Look at how the tiger just endlessly pacing by himself. At this part, it seems to be confirmed that the staff left these people in these enclosures, and we're seeing the psychosis of these people trapped in a cage with no way out. The cheetah-looking animal mascot here breathing abnormally, the actor behind him swiping at seemingly nothing, the tiger pacing out of boredom in his enclosure, sort of like Vsauce was pacing in his little cell during the maximum isolation prison experiment. The rhinos following a similar pattern though. We're reaching a climax of just how uncomfortable and isolated these actors seem to be in captivity here, losing themselves in this process as the description says. Last thing of note, but the same description also says there's no order left to break. Is this an implication that the actors have not been putting in the effort to behave like the animals they're supposed to represent? AKA breaking order? Did this lead to the abandonment by the caretakers and the staff because they weren't following the rules, or they just couldn't be helped? There are no more orders left to unfollow. Do as you wish. Go. That's the sort of implication I get here. Alright, you don't want to maintain this acting that you're supposed to be doing? So be it. Go ahead. We all left. And when the actors realize, even despite not having orders anymore, their situation is not any more humane. Just because they don't have to mandatorily act as the animals they represent. Go be an animal locked up in a cage or don't. It doesn't matter anymore. Not gonna lie, this part to me is pretty straightforward in my eyes. It just shows more of the isolation these actors are going through, being abandoned. And in the caption, in the description, it says the following: their masks remain intact, expressions frozen in an endless grin. But something underneath, something beneath them keeps shifting, like the faces underneath are trying to remember how to move. The rabbits still attempt to burrow through every layer of straw and concrete. One lies still near the corner. It looks gone, but if you watch closely, it breathes once, just once. Then again. In the gorge, the scavengers keep sorting through debris that no longer belongs to anyone. They move slower every year, like they're waiting for something to tell them it's finished. Intercoms are still wired, but they play nothing on this day. Just silence shaped like a song everyone's forgotten. What lies ahead for the zoo of tomorrow. Now, amongst all the parts so far, this is the most in-depth description we got. It provides more context to each exhibit, starting with the hyenas, where AHTV mentions the rabbits attempting to burrow through every layer of straw and concrete. The third exhibit of animals moving slower and scavenging. Now, the last part of the description mentions the intercoms being still wired, but they play nothing on this day. And you know, looking back at the other parts, even the ones without commentary, it is interesting to note that absolutely nothing is played in this part like those parts. You heard some background noise, some background music, and it really brings out that liminal horror of being alone and isolated more than any of the other parts. It really shows the captivity theme we've been seeing throughout all these parts in full display, uncensored and raw. My only question once we transition to the next part is, who is recording now? Now that the staff and visitors left, who is capturing this stuff? Many questions I have as I'm going through the later stages of these parts. So without further ado, on to the next part.
Welcome to the Zoo of Tomorrow. Petting zone handlers are unavailable at this time. Please do not enter the enclosure even if invited.
They were performers at first. Then they were something else. If you know the petting zone, you know what happened next. Just another day at the Zoo of Tomorrow. A lot to unpack in this part. We see a goat eating, followed by flashbacks to an earlier time of the zoo, or perhaps when things were functioning and people were visiting what looks like the petting zone, where you could feed the animals yourself. You know, like in farms or zoos, that section where you can feed animals hay or whatever and pet them. Well, this is what they become without the warmth of children, I guess, or people feeding them. These so-called animals in the petting zone, they just have become monstrous and just demonic over the years. But listen in on the loudspeaker as the flashbacks and current time videos are going back and forth. Petting zone handlers are unavailable at this time. Please do not enter the enclosure if invited. Like, bro, what do you mean by that? What do you mean invited? Invited by the actors in the petting zone? Why can't people enter without handlers? What would happen if unsupervised? There's a serious implication being made here, but I guess my interpretation or theory, if I had to give one, is something major happened in the petting zone. Perhaps this is the major implication that caused the downturn of the Zoo of Tomorrow. Why else would there be this warning saying do not enter if to the enclosure even if invited? Why else would there be that warning? Could the zoo have closed because of something that happened in the petting zone? It's giving like Bite of 87 from FNAF, if you will. Like in that story, after the Bite of 87, Fazbear chain restaurant was losing popularity due to that serious incident. Could something in the petting zone have caused a loss in visitors? I don't know, it's just a theory.
But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
But all of that aside, how is the cameraman getting so close to a demonic looking creature like this and not getting eaten or something? The cameraman never dies trope, I guess, exists even in this horrific universe. I don't know, but this part had a notable comment I wanted to point out from the creator. Someone says, "Not the farm animals, I thought they were free." And AHTV says, "The gates were open, the exits were not." Everyone believed they were free. That belief kept the program running. Another clue we get from AHTV. No, some bite of 87 shit definitely happened at the petting zone. I'm calling it now. But what if AHTV doesn't just mean the gates to the petting zone, but overall the gates to entering the zoo in general were open? Another possible theory that I'm thinking about right now is like you enter the zoo as a whole and you don't come out, keeping the program running implies to me something sinister. I just don't have enough to make firm conclusions though, so let's move on to the next part.
Across the multiverse, certain archives were never meant to be opened, but every so often, something slips through. This footage comes from the Zoo of Tomorrow, or at least one version of it. The years don't line up, the technology doesn't match, and none of the exhibits agree on what's alive and what's pretending. Some clips look ancient, like they were recorded on dying tape. Others feel too modern to exist. Yet every enclosure shares the same rumor. The creatures are only costumes. But no one can explain why the movements look so wrong. People say the audio frequencies overlap across decades, across worlds, same pitch, same pulse, like something on the other side is trying to keep time with us. What you're watching isn't a reconstruction, it's an unfiltered pull from the multiverse. And if this is only the beginning, we might not be observing the zoo, it might be observing us.
Alright, so everything we saw prior I'm going to label as Act 1, because from here on out, for the next 3 parts, we get some sort of narrator of sorts, breaking the fourth wall, providing some more insight. The narrator throws an immediate curveball and starts the video by saying, "Across the multiverse, certain archives were never meant to be open, but every so often, something slips through." Like, off-rip, multiverse, archives. Like, we are just immediately hit with exposition for something more expansive going on. Is this a metaphor, or is this an inside look to another version of a world out there like ours? He also says, one version of the Zoo of Tomorrow. Could this be a version where things did not work out, as we have seen in these later parts? Which ones are spliced from different multiverses? We can see another version of the Zoo of Tomorrow in a flashback in the previous part with the petting zone, and how almost night and day each version of the Zoo of Tomorrow looked. Towards the end of the narration, he concludes with, "We might not be observing the zoo, it might be observing us." How can something from a cage be observing us? To do what? How is it observing us? Through the camera in which they are being filmed? It's very ambiguous, this part, but I feel like it has a larger implication that I'm trying to piece together here. I would love to hear your theory on this in the comments below. The description here mentions, "If the footage looks familiar, it should. These fragments were never meant to be standalone. Together, they form the first true entry in the archive. Welcome to the Zoo of Tomorrow." Together, they form the first true entry in the archive. Now, perhaps the creator AHTV wants to distinguish all the parts we've seen before, like I did, calling it Act 1, sort of categorization, but we won't know until more parts come out, so let's move on to the next part. Perhaps we can get more context.
In 1987, a private research collective proposed something they called a living archive, a hybrid of performance art, robotics, and behavioral conditioning, a place where memory itself could be shaped, rehearsed, and displayed, all of it contained inside a single zoological park. When the Zoo of Tomorrow finally opened in 1990, visitors were told the creatures were advanced animatronics, but internally, the truth was softer, warmer, human. Most exhibits were people sealed inside full-body suits, taught to move like things they were not. Early guests described the displays as unsettling but fascinating. By the mid-90s. Next time, we move into the era when the zoo didn't just decline, it fractured. Systems overloaded, performers broke protocol, and entire attractions went feral in ways no one could control. The Zoo of Tomorrow, found only on Almost Human TV.
So here we clearly have a backstory of the Zoo of Tomorrow that reinforces three things. The Zoo of Tomorrow was supposed to be a combination of performance art, robotics, and behavioral conditioning. For what reason? That part is unclear. We're told a private research collective wanted to create what is referred to as a living archive. They want to create a living memory for people that they could control in the way that they seem fit. But again, I ask why? For what purpose? Is this an art-driven project, or is this something more sinister? Experimentation? The second thing that this backstory reinforces is a more robust timeline for us. Discussions of this project began in 1987. It's funny how 1987 is a significant year in so many stories. But also the opening of the zoo taking place sometime in 1990. The footage begins to diminish when they speak about the mid-1990s, specifically 1995. Is this when the park began to fall apart? Less people came by? I wonder. Leave your thoughts below the significance of this imagery and the breaking down of the footage when 1995 is mentioned. The third thing that we get reinforced in this part was the people visiting were told initially that the animal suits were animatronics. This is also evident on the sign and display at the front of the entrance of the Zoo of Tomorrow that these are animatronics inside of the exhibits. When in reality, we get confirmed, the narrator says, the truth was softer. People were under the suits, and we see images of actors being helped by the staff. So knowing these three facts, that the Zoo of Tomorrow was created and pushed for by researchers, it opened in 1990, something terrible or of significance happened in 1995, the people were told a lie, that there were no humans underneath these suits, they're machinery. Is this an experiment that the researchers wanted to know, using the guise of performance art as a justification to collect data on something, and the test subjects being the people who come to view and the actors who are losing their minds? But a part of me feels like they did not want the zoo to deteriorate either. The narrator concludes this part by saying, next time we move into an era not only where the zoo deteriorated, but when systems fractured and overloaded. Actors kept breaking protocol, and actors went feral in ways where they could no longer be controlled. Is this something that the researchers truly wanted? Why were the actors left behind? Was there no use in trying to save their sanity and instead rot here? I wonder. Did the actors undergo method acting where they became so psychotic and in combination of trying to play as an animal, they start to believe that they are no longer human? And instead, the animal they are portrayed as. A sort of method acting gone wrong because of how bad things got, and the very nature of captivity eating away at these actors' minds. These are some theories I have. A notable comment we get again from the creator comes from this comment chain right here. This is the backstory us invested people have been waiting for. This is crazy though. Why would they think people couldn't tell that these were real people? And why did they choose vulnerable people to be in the costumes? Because who would agree to this? To which AHTV says, very crazy. It seems some roles were chosen, others were assigned. Not everyone was supposed to know the difference, and calling them animatronic was the easiest way to keep people from asking what they really were. I think the performers were eager at first, and then, eventually, went on to experience full-on psychosis. The footage from the latter years, they're very clearly not all there mentally. So some roles were chosen, others were assigned. What distinction made this possible? Why were some actors able to choose and others not? We get acknowledged here that the actors were on board at first and then underwent some sort of transformation where, again, I called it method acting gone wrong, turning into the thing that they're supposed to be acting as, in combination with the loss of their sanity from captivity. Either way, some oblivious people who visit won't be able to tell the difference. it seems, in this universe. This is about what I can extract from this part. So on to the next.
The serpent wing was designed to be completely autonomous. Those alarms you hear were supposed to trigger only during a containment breach. Yet all the doors remained sealed. Maintenance logs claim the serpents were safely powered down that morning, but the footage disagrees. Something keeps the animatronics tracking movement. Further inside the complex was the invertebrate theater. This is one of the final recordings before the cast abandoned their posts. The moth, usually calm, almost gentle, shows uncharacteristic agitation. Its chest beating wasn't part of the routine. What happened in the invertebrate theater wasn't isolated. Beneath the old filtration bay, an even stranger exhibit remained partially powered. Next time, we uncover what the park tried hardest to hide: the deep current display and the creatures that were never supposed to move on their own.
Okay, so in this part, we focus first with the serpent exhibit, which is supposed to be comprised of animatronics. But as we learned in the last part, this is not the case. We know it's still people and actors inside these costumes. But how the hell does it look like that in this demonic thing? Like, where is the outline of the body? It's confusing me. Since we know that there are humans underneath here, there is now an alarm blasting into the exhibit, and no staff is nearby to stop it. I can only imagine the torture these people listening to this all day, this blaring alarm, what they are going through. The narrator mentions that in the maintenance logs, they claimed, the workers, that the animatronics were powered down, but the footage says otherwise, as we can see. Who turned on the alarm? How did this happen? Why did it go off if there's no containment breach? And first of all, a containment breach of what? Like, I don't get it. We then get to see the invertebrate exhibit, where the main focus here is showing how anxious the actors are getting here, with the moth specifically, which is pointed out to be usually calm, is stepping out of its routine and beating its chest. I thought that was a good measure of adding tension and uneasiness to the overall part here. Even more strange is the next exhibit they show us. Underneath the old filtration bay, we see this underwater exhibit, and this is different from the other aquatic exhibits we've seen in previous parts, because this exhibit actually has water, like real water. So I have to assume that these things we see here are indeed animatronics? Like, is this supposed to be a squid? I just can't make it out. Then we flip to the deep current display. Now, these people look like actors in suits, but how are they breathing underwater, assuming that there's actors underneath? The narrator says that they weren't supposed to move on their own, but they did. I would definitely like to know more about these underwater exhibits. We get some more information in the description that says the following: one wing malfunctions, another stirs. The zoo of tomorrow has its own way of calling things awake, and those alarms were the first invitation. In the neighboring timelines, the alarms aren't the beginning. They're the last thing anyone hears. I'm getting like Night of the Museum a little bit, except these are, real people behind the cages, underneath the suits, and some animatronics, I assume, like we saw in the underwater exhibit. Like when one exhibit starts showing patterns of stepping out of the acting they're supposed to be doing, the other exhibits surrounding that exhibit where problems are occurring, like the next one is exhibiting the same patterns. But correlate that with this universe where the invertebrate moth starts freaking out, and this causes a chain reaction to other exhibits or something. It's implied here as well that the alarm sort of woke the actors, or the animatronics, quote unquote, in this exhibit. I'm still going to assume that these are actors even in costumes, where it doesn't seem like it's possible to have a human underneath. And me assuming that, this is just someone behind the scenes is doing some sort of like torture method on these actors. Then the last part of the description: in the neighboring timelines, the alarms aren't the beginning, they're the last thing anyone hears. Perhaps we'll get some more footage of exhibits we have seen in past parts in other timelines where they do other things. Unfortunately, this is the last part, so I can only theorize from here. This was last posted in November of 2025, so about 4 months ago, as of me making this video. My only hope is the creator is still working on this project, which from what I've seen from this one comment, I found in one of the parts. This comment was made a couple days ago and he's responding to a comment made in February, so I can only assume that this project is still greenlit. Okay, so what do we get from all the parts that I'm gathering? Now it's time to like piece some things together. First, let's start with the origins of this park. Remember, it was discussed as an idea in 1987, and then the park opened sometime in 1990. A decline of some sorts or an important event is implied in 1995. From part 11, where the petting zone was happening, and then the 1995 footage, I can only assume that perhaps these two are somewhat correlated, the petting zone and the 1995 decline. Our question right now is this decline something caused internally from the actors or externally by people that just stopped showing up? I'm going to assume something happened internally that caused people to not show up. My assumption is the Zoo of Tomorrow is supposed to be some sort of art performance and attraction for people coming by. It is assumed that most people are under the belief that these are high-tech animatronics, but we have seen instances in earlier parts where people just aren't buying it. So again, why lie? For what purpose are these groups of researchers trying to accomplish by lying to the public about this fact? It was confirmed by AHTV, it's to have people stop asking questions. But again, why? What is the objectives of this supposed experiment? Perhaps we will get that answered later on the motivation behind this whole Zoo of Tomorrow. Now, some of the things that we've been seeing during these parts, we see the descent into insanity from these actors. The later we get into the closing of the zoo, the more insane the actors seem to get and distraught. We see the descent into insanity from these actors and themes of captivity causing this on the actors. Secret experimentations, because a group of researchers came up with this idea. So I'd have to imagine that some sort of data collection is occurring. But throughout all the parts, the theme of captivity, and there is nothing you can do to help them, is seen throughout all of the parts of this story for the most part. We know the creator of AHTV feels some type of way when he visits zoos himself. He said despite that feeling, of course, he understands zoos provide services for animals that cannot survive outside of captivity. But there is still that strange aura of captivity that you cannot simply shake off. Now juxtapose that with humans, it really brings out the uneasiness of captivity even more. And I would like to get more context for humans or these actors when they break quote-unquote order. They're supposed to be self-automated. Is it by their own will, or is this a trigger that they're supposed to be in the animal state that they're representing? Is that caused by something external? Overall, I really like the atmosphere of these videos and these TikToks and the context of comments and descriptions adding more to the lore. I think that that's a pretty good medium to theorize and get behind a project. Part of what I think makes a good story is making me feel like I'm in the universe. For instance, if you've seen Breaking Bad, for example, when I was watching that show, it deadass made me feel like I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And in here, the Zoo of Tomorrow brings me along to this dystopian alternate reality where humans are in costumes in a zoo for consumers to just casually, nonchalantly view and spectate like everything's normal. But it sells that alternate reality really well. And we discussed in earlier parts of real life implications, real life scenarios where something similar to this happened with real people at the World Fair. I don't have much critiques of this story. I think the overall concept is a great concept, highlighting themes of experimentations on actors and the experimentations going wrong due to captivity. But there is much, much more lore I want unpacked. Like the exhibits with water, with actual water, or the fact that we saw in one of the exhibits real animals. We now know that the inception of the Zoo of Tomorrow came from a group of researchers, and at first actors consenting to this weird experiment or this weird attraction. But I would like to understand the motivations of the researchers more and see how that connects with the story overall, with the actors losing their sanity. For what purpose? I would like to see more of that lore unpacked. But like I said, when this project comes back, because the creator last posted this in November of 2025. So give this project a look yourself on TikTok. Maybe you'll find things that I couldn't find. I'll link it in the description below. I'm glad I could talk about a project a little bit, especially a horror related project like this, because lately, if you've seen my last horror video, for example, things have just not been catching my eye horror wise. But that's where I think I'm going to end today's video. Let me know what you think of this story. Do you have some of your own theories? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe for more internet related content. I like talking about horror, drama, really any types of content on the internet. It's a vast place, and I'd like to sort of have an online forum, an online discussion about different things and topics on this channel, like a living amoeba online forum. So if you're into that kind of idea, subscribe down below. To the left of me is going to be some other videos you can check out. Like I said, I cover a whole genre of different internet topics. But I'm your internet bro, Raph, rocking the Akatsuki. Shout out to the Naruto fans again. Until the next video, I am outski.